All right, welcome back to Always Adaptive. I'm your host, Randall James. I'm a certified strength and running coach, and today we're answering the question, is it enough to just do yoga or Pilates? While this question is important and relevant to all kinds of different people, it's particularly important to me because a large percentage of my clients are post or perimenopausal women, meaning women that are currently going through menopause. And these people have to contend with a lot of different issues because of hormonal issues. So they're dealing with muscle loss, bone loss, fat gain, the list goes on. But there's a running joke that women will literally do anything else in order to avoid strength training. And while I do think that situation has improved some, there's a lot of women that are getting interested in lifting weights. There are still a lot of women out there that are avoiding weight training for one reason or another, relying on yoga or Pilates because they believe that those two things are good enough. I'm here to tell you exactly why that's not the case. Let me just state my bias up front. I am a strength coach, so muscle, strength, and bone are all very important to me. So I did go into this project aware of that bias, and I made it a point to try and check myself and look at the data as objectively as possible. I gave yoga and Pilates a fair shake, and just to be clear, this video is not saying you should stop doing yoga or Pilates. I think they're both incredibly valuable tools. They're great for beginners, they're great for people who are intimidated by weights, and for those that are looking to just move better or explore what their body can do in a gentle way. So put the pitchforks down, it's all good. This video is only saying that yoga and Pilates on their own are not enough. So what is the standard I'm holding them to? Bone mineral density. Why? Because people that do not lift weights will lose an inordinate amount of muscle and bone as they age. It's as close to an inevitability as you can get, seriously. So how does your body actually build bone? Well, your bodies adapt to stress, your bones specifically as well. When you apply force to them, especially through muscular contractions, they get denser and stronger. This is called Wolff's Law. Resistance training and impact-based activities like sprinting or jumping create the most effective load signals for bone. Low impact work does not. These forces activate what are called osteocytes. These are strain sensing cells in your skeleton. That triggers osteoblasts, which are bone building cells, and helps suppress osteoclasts, that are cells that break down your bone. Yoga and Pilates simply do not create enough mechanical tension to kick off this cascade of events. So why am I harping on bone so much? 99% of females are going to go through menopause. And as I said earlier, this comes with a loss of muscle and bone. Women are disproportionately affected by osteoporosis, but it does affect men as well. I want to touch on osteopenia first. This is a step below osteoporosis where you are definitely losing bone mineral density, but it's not to the point where they might be experiencing fractures. So this is just to put things into perspective. 43 to 50% of all women over the age of 50 will experience osteopenia. 30 to 35% of all men over the age of 50 will experience osteopenia. So this affects both sexes over the age of 50. For osteoporosis, women account for 80% of all osteoporosis cases, where men account for about 20% of the cases. So with this being the case, your fitness routine has to include bone loss and muscle loss prevention. It just has to. There's no getting around it. I'm sorry. But you know me, I'm not just going to say that. Let's look at what the data shows. We're going to start with this paper on yoga and Pilates entitled Effectiveness of Pilates and Yoga to Improve Bone Density in Adult Women, a systematic review and meta-analysis. It pulled results from several studies that tracked changes in bone density before and after those interventions, specifically focused on adult women, and most of the included studies were conducted in postmenopausal women. That said, the exact menopausal status wasn't always clearly defined in every individual study, and some simply included older women or middle-aged women. This is important because this is the exact population affected most by bone loss, as I just said. You're looking at a forest plot here, and if you've never seen one of these before, here's how it works. On the left-hand side, you see the list of the different studies. The vertical black line in the middle represents no effect at all. If the whiskers stay to the right of that line, that's a positive result. If they cross the line, not statistically significant, and that represents the confidence interval. So the further to the right the dot goes that's in the middle of each whisker, the bigger the impact. So you can see for most of these studies, they were declared not statistically significant because the entire range of the whisker, the confidence interval, crosses that vertical black line, which means no effect. But what did they find? Most studies showed small or no changes. A few, like Amgen and Motorola, showed moderate improvements, but the majority were hovering around zero. Here's how you interpret the effect size, which is referred to as the standardized mean difference. Essentially, an effect size of 0 means no effect, 0.10 means very small effect, 0.20 means small effect, 0.50 means medium effect, and 0.80 plus equals a large effect. So in this case, 0.10 means that the yoga Pilates groups had a bone mineral density improvement of 0.10 standard deviations higher than the control group. That's a very small effect, bordering on clinically negligible unless it accumulates over time. And to be fair, the data was fairly consistent. Low variability across studies. This is referred to as low heterogeneity. For example, one study could be hot yoga and another could be a beginner yoga class. That would be high heterogeneity or high variability. But there were a lot of problems with this study, don't get me wrong. There was definitely small sample sizes. Not all of the studies used DEXA to measure bone density, which a DEXA scan would be like the gold standard. There were also no controls for calcium, protein, or calories, and many of the studies were less than 6 months, which you might need a longer period to see meaningful changes in bone. All of that makes it hard to draw strong conclusions, but this is just one of many studies. Anytime there's an increase in bone density on any of the studies that I found, it was pretty much negligible. And in fact, some of the data outside of this study actually showed continuing bone loss, meaning the interventions weren't even enough to stop the bone loss. So what does this all mean? Well, yoga and Pilates might help you improve your movement quality and quality of life by improving your mobility, your stability, reducing your chances of falling, or ending up with a tear-related injury. But they're simply not enough when it comes to muscle and bone. Now, what are we comparing that to? Let's compare it to resistance training. This next meta-analysis looked at 8 different types of exercise and how they affect bone mineral density in postmenopausal women. So again, the population is correct for this study. It was entitled Effect of Different Types of Exercise on Bone Mineral Density in Postmenopausal Women, a Systematic Review and Network Meta-Analysis. Before we dive into the results, I want to address something that sort of confused me when I first dove into the study. The study reported mean differences like 140 or 32 for bone mineral density. That seemed way too high, but after digging through the methods and comparing it to other DEXA scans from other studies, I realized they're reporting in milligrams per square centimeter. So 140 equals 0.140 grams per centimeter squared. And that's a big deal. Typically, with a study that is measuring, like an individual study that is measuring this, they will measure it in grams. So obviously, it's not going to be an increase of 140 grams per centimeter squared of bone mineral density. So it has to be that 140 means 0.140 grams per centimeter squared. And that's a big deal. That's clinically meaningful. These scientists also used a forest plot to present the results. Same rules apply here. So each line is a training method, which they have the training protocol to the left. The vertical line is no change. Data points to the right of that line mean gains in bone density. The further and tighter the confidence interval, the stronger the result. They measured bone mineral density at the lumbar spine and the femoral neck. These are 2 of the most common fracture sites for people with bone loss, so this makes total sense. So what did they find? For lumbar spine bone mineral density, the best result came from combining aerobic training with resistance training at 32.35 milligrams per centimeter squared. Aerobic training alone also had great results at 22.33 milligrams per centimeter squared. And resistance training alone came in at 16.38 milligrams per centimeter squared. And you know me, I'm super stoked about that because I am a huge proponent of cardio and mixing both resistance training and cardio. So this is also a huge win for cardio. Anyways, everything else either didn't work or didn't work well. Now for the femoral neck. Once again, aerobic exercise paired with resistance training had the greatest result at 140 milligrams per centimeter squared increase. Resistance training alone, very similar to the lumbar at 16.98. The rest, inconsistent and mostly non-significant. So again, big win for combination of aerobic exercise and resistance training, but also resistance training alone. That's a much greater increase than any of the yoga or Pilates studies I was able to find. So once again, this isn't me saying that you should stop doing yoga or Pilates. This is me saying that you should be aiming to check multiple boxes, not just a movement box. Movement is great. And it's good to check that box. But intensity is such an important box to check, both from a resistance training standpoint and also a cardio standpoint. Although I'm a very conservative coach, I try to encourage my people to push the envelope frequently. I poke and I prod and I find their boundaries and I make them bump up against them when it's appropriate. It's uncomfortable sometimes, but just like I've learned to love it, some of them are now learning to love it. And it's the key to living a long and healthy life. But that's it for me. Once again, my name is Randall James, and this is a little bit shorter of a video. I'm experimenting to see what the audience retention rate might be and how it affects the algorithm. Most of my videos are anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes long. And so just seeing how a shorter video or shorter podcast performs in general. But once again, I am a strength and a running coach, and this is Always Adaptive, a business born from the idea that we are always adapting, literally right this moment, whether you are sitting or standing. That is an input into your nervous system. You're adapting to that. Every time you eat certain foods or partake in certain activities, you're adapting to that. So control your inputs and you can control your life. I will see you at the next one.